We're going to begin now. Got it. Okay. So first, using the chat, tell me what you guys think negotiation is. When you hear the word negotiation, what do you think? I wish this was my text so I could see at least like 3 buttons to know you're typing. And I know you guys are. Yes, compromise. Ooh, Karen, have you already looked at my slides? Discussion to reach an agreement. You clearly don't need me for this. I don't know why I'm not teaching in U3. Knowing and communicating your value. Absolutely. These are all great examples and you guys are totally jumping the gun. Karen, no, you've not seen my slides. Well, I feel like you have. So one of the important things is a lot of times it's challenging, it's hard. Sometimes it's seen as a battle. Like even if it's a discussion, it's still like a tense discussion and we don't want to have that. But negotiation is not where someone wins and someone loses. Because we think like if we ask, we may lose our job, right? So we want to make sure that we're thinking kind of like what was in the chat. Go into a negotiation knowing that both sides are working toward the same thing, which is you taking the job and being happy. So this makes looking at the negotiation a little less overwhelming because it can be, right? We're talking about your career and sometimes it feels like, are they rejecting me personally if I don't get the salary? So then what's a negotiation? Like everyone in the chat said, it's really just a conversation with the goal of reaching an agreement with someone whose interests are not perfectly aligned with yours. In a study by salary.com found that 84% of employers expect job applicants to negotiate salary. I think in this day and age, most employers are just kind of like waiting for you and they know, and they may even lowball you a little bit so that they know that you're going to ask. So the next part of this is employers make an offer that a candidate is because a candidate is their candidate of choice. Most employers see the value of reaching an agreement with their top choice. So is there really a risk in negotiating if you know that they want you? Companies have lost productivity while interviewing and through the recruitment process. And this can all be costly. So depending on the onboarding, average, especially when we're talking about like mom and pop, small, independent 1 and 2 employees up to some larger companies, the average cost is $5,000, but I've seen it upwards of like $14,000 and $15,000. Especially some companies, they'll, send you to, the home office and you'll be at the home office for a week and they're, paying for your, airfare and hotel and food and all of that. So depending on their onboarding, their hiring process, plus that's just an average time of 42 days, business isn't being done. Can a company really afford to lose that productivity over 42 days? I'm going to tell you personally as a hiring manager, I want to make you happy so I don't have to go through this process again. So I don't have to wait another 40 days for this person to get hired. And sometimes the HR process can be long, especially when we're talking about criminal background checks and all the process of filling everything out. And then by the time that you have your first day, all of that, we as hiring managers really want to fill our empty role and we want to fill it with you, especially UTSA students. Our employers in San Antonio love UTSA students. Okay, so now you're feeling a little more confident and you're like, okay, I can negotiate. I'm going to at least ask because there's no harm in asking, right? But when do we negotiate? So basically you want to focus on your interview and getting the offer. You want, like we talked about, to be that top candidate. They're like, we want you, you've beat everyone out. Then worry about negotiation. So when you have that offer in hand, that's when you start that negotiation. So a big mistake is starting a negotiation too early. There are things you can do to prepare early on in the process, but you should avoid discussing salary during the interview itself. That is, unless the interviewer brings it up. So sometimes an interviewer, to make sure that you guys are completely on the same page, will say, hey, so what's your salary? And you can make some of these points. Before we talk about salary, I'd like to find out more about the position and see if we feel it's a mutual fit. Or I'm somewhat flexible on the total package and work environment. What salary range are you hoping to hire within? So you want to throw it back on them so it's not just you. Because if you throw out a salary, it may be lower than what their offer is. So you want to make sure, hey, what did the job description say is the high end? But you also want to ask them, well, what salary range are you looking to hire in? Great, that's acceptable for me. But on the flip side, I had a position where it was like an entry-level position. I had one salary. I had zero room to negotiate. He came into the interview and I said, great. So what salary range are you looking at? He said something like 20 to 30,000 above. And I'm like, are you willing to adjust that? And he's like, no. And I'm like, great, thank you. Nice meeting you. And sometimes it's okay if you don't match up because then it might not be the best fit. But just make sure you don't want to bring it up. Your only goal is to make the interviewer want you and have them be willing to do whatever it takes to get you started because you truly are the best candidate for the job. So don't have it be, usually the interviewer will have a questions time at the end and they'll say, what questions do you have for me? Absolutely do not have that be one of your questions. As a hiring manager, I had someone whose only questions were, what's the salary? Who's your insurance carrier? Tell me about your benefits. As an employer, what do you think I remembered about this person? And you feel free to use the chat. What do you think I'm remembering about this person after they left the interview? Only interested in pay and benefits. Spot on. I was like, nothing unique about them. I was like, this person cares more and got more excited about the pay and benefits than when I was talking to them about, hey, here's what you're going to be doing. Here's what you'll be engaging with the students. They didn't care about any of the job activities, skills, experiences, but their face lit up when we told them the salary. They're like, oh, and what are the benefits? I was like, nope, this candidate is not for us. All right. So what can you do to prepare early for a salary conversation or negotiation? Correct. They won't stay if they find a better offer elsewhere. So if I'm a hiring manager and I know this person, we call them job beggars. They're just there looking for the best salary and they're going to keep looking. So you want to first start by finding salary info online. So you want to check out these resources, but you can also always just Google specific job titles or career fields and see what comes up. In addition to what's listed, does anyone have any other location where salary information is available? I think there's also CQT. And then I don't know, Ruben, do you have anything specific for engineering? Is there like an engineering website or anything? So Glassdoor is great because these are employee perspectives of a company and employee reviews. And so you can hear if they're lowballing people. You can know that you have to go high. ONET Online is a government website where it will give all of the salary kind of factually based. And so you know based on job titles. Salary.com, and then always the Bureau of Labor and Statistics is always the best one to go, especially because they'll have averages for your industry by city and by job title as well. A little difficult to navigate, but I love the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. And if I do a good Google search with some information, usually they'll pop up. Then also reach out to your own contacts, use the alumni, go on LinkedIn, reach out to them and start having those conversations. And then also go to the company website. Hey, they're hiring 15 civil engineers. What's the salary range for all of these? Then you have a good idea. Ruben likes Glassdoor. Yeah, there's some engineering specific data, but it might be a little dated, but at least you have a baseline to know, hey, is this good or not? LinkedIn Premium has some comparable positions, and then just reaching out to alumni. So you can do some LinkedIn searches. And that's for a whole different workshop. So you can tell Ruben that you want me to come back and do a LinkedIn connections workshop. All right. So here's another way to prepare before you start negotiating. You're going to want to personally prioritize your wants and needs. So the first step is to evaluate what you want. We all want $1 million, but is that realistic. But what will satisfy you? There are a lot of factors involved, and you want to consider them all as you prepare. So when it comes to salary specifically, one important point to consider is what will be your walk-away point, the point where you turn them down. Like, this is the point where I can't feed my family and I can't afford to pay my bills. So this is that minimum salary. Ideal salary is, hey, this is what the average is. This is a good comparison to what is in the industry from the research. And then the salary I'll start negotiating with is your aspirational salary. This is where I want to be. This is the high end, and I'm going to start by asking for 90,000 because I know I can work down, right? And then if we land at a different average, that's great. But you also need to think of your alternatives if you have to turn someone down. So if they go below your minimum salary and you turn them down, what are your alternatives? Are you currently working and you're just going to stay in your same position? Nothing's going to change. Is it unemployment? If you don't get this job, you are not working anywhere and have zero income. Or are you interviewing for other positions and you know that you're going to find something else? So of course, there are some things that can be more important than money. Maybe you're willing to take a lower salary to get into a particular company because of its reputation. Or maybe you've applied to many positions, but one is more appealing to you because it offers a better long-term career option. Or maybe you've been job hunting for a while and you're like, I'm done with job searching and putting in applications. And so just getting a job is going to be a priority with less regard for salary. Don't hesitate to take all of these things into consideration. It's about what works for you in your situation. So we've just kind of talked about some salary expectations. To focus on that for just a moment, what you want to know is you don't want to give them ranges. So if in the interview, they're like, hey, tell us what's your ideal salary? We've all been told for like years and years, give them a range. Oh, between 80 and 90,000, between 40 and 50,000. That suggests you're willing to concede, and the person you're negotiating with may immediately jump to the smaller number. So if you say I'm willing to, my range is 40 to 50,000, great. They know if they offer you 40,000, you're going to be okay with that. So what you want to do is you want to give a specific number. This implies you've done your research on the position and salary. These figures were part of your prep, and aspirational numbers are usually where we want to begin negotiating. Knowing that number may be a bit far-fetched. So based on my experience, you want 90,000. Based on my experience in this position and my research, can we discuss a salary of 89,500 for this position, right? Like, see how confident I am? Just give that one number, don't give a range. So if they do ask, go for that higher end closer to aspirational, because then when you negotiate, everyone will give a little bit and you'll end up a little lower. But perhaps your company can't afford to increase the salary offer because there's a freeze on raises. Hello, pandemic, right? Everyone had a freeze on everything. In these cases, you can look for other things to negotiate. Here's a list of a ton of different things depending on the company and where you're going. Additional vacation days offer more of a work-life balance. Bonuses in particular are great incentives for both parties because it allows for a system of mutual achievement with checks and balances, right? I give you this number and produce this. You give me this. Great, everyone's happy. So evaluate the list of possibilities and look at the whole package you are offered. If some things like professional development or relocation expenses aren't mentioned, ask them about it. So there's two different things, and I have a whole other topic for if you're already in a position and you want a raise. You can ask for a raise based on inflation. You want to bring your research, and you also want to bring additional documentation. So you want to bring performance reviews and say, hey, I'm a five-star employee, and this is, what I expect. And again, use these tools to negotiate. So maybe you can't negotiate for a raise because, hey, some things are happening, but can I ask for telecommuting? Can I ask for a bonus? Can I ask for additional vacation time? Will they pay for a certificate or continuing education? There are some programs at the university where like getting your certificate or license is like $10,000, $15,000. Like if they pay for everything as you're going through the process, great. You're now saving that money. But there's so many different things that you can get and benefits that apply to both a salary negotiation and a raise. So one of the things I want to share an example between that we had is, so I had an international student who needed a sponsorship, and that was important to them. So sponsorship to an employer can cost about $40,000 because they have to pay for a lot of paperwork and a lot of documents and all of that good stuff that our government's great at. His initial salary offer was lower than what he wanted and what others during his internship were being offered. So we discussed what his priority was. We kind of had a conversation and went into that form and kind of said, hey, what are your priorities? What are you going to be okay with? And so he decided the sponsorship was the top priority because that's hard to get and hard to find. And his minimum salary was what they offered him at $75,000. So he was already getting the sponsorship and his minimum salary. So we kind of discussed what the best approach to the conversation was. We discussed, okay, is he going to walk away if they say no, or if they're not able to negotiate? And so he turned it into a discussion, had some very pointed questions with some active listening and discussing, what's my whole package with the recruiter. He ended up with a final salary of $90,000 at Dell, which was comparable to everybody else in his position and at his internship from other schools and what they were making. Elizabeth had a question about, is there a difference between a sign-on bonus and equity matching? Yes. So sign-on is, hey, you're signing, I'm going to give you cash just for signing, or some sort of equity usually implies, and even though I work in the College of Business, I am not an expert in this. Equity is usually like you're getting an investment into the company. So you're getting some sort of, it's not quite like having a cash check in hand, but it's saying, hey, you have it kind of an ownership stake or an investment stake in a company. A lot more to that, and that's definitely something that you want to evaluate, because typically a sign-on bonus is immediately. You sign the offer letter, you're coming on board, sometimes it's you work 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and we give you the check. Where equity is probably going to be a lot more of a long-term process at a company. And so it's part of keeping you there a little longer. So sometimes it's longer. If you're there longer, you'll see more of a return on your investment. And oftentimes that's also, if the company does well, then you do well and get money on that. So there is a difference. It just depends on what your wants and needs are. I've only heard of these options when the company might not be able to meet salary expectations, but wants to continue with the negotiations. Absolutely. There are so many opportunities with that. You can also discuss, commissions. Hey, can I work on commission, or sort of end of year bonus? So there's the sign-on bonus and then end of year. Hey, if I do this, can I get this? There's also a tiered structure where you can say, hey, after 6 months, I'll get a raise of, $5,000 on my salary. At a year, then I'll get a $10,000. Because sometimes, especially if it's a newer startup, they're banking on their marketing plan and their revenue increasing. And so if you start at this, but I'm going to tell you, and I'll probably say this again because everyone needs to hear it, whatever is in your offer letter, that's what you agree to. So you may have a verbal agreement with someone and say, hey, here's what we're going to give you. We're going to give you commission. We're going to give you a tiered bonus structure. We're going to give you equity. You can have a verbal agreement. If it is not written down, you are not going to get it. They could honor a verbal, but you have no leg to stand on and say, well, hey, you gave me this. So whatever is in your offer letter, make sure that you agree to it. Because once you sign that offer letter, it's you saying, I agree to the terms in this offer letter. I agree to these terms and these are satisfactory. So if there's something that you verbally discussed, that's also part of that negotiation of, hey, we agreed that there would be a tiered salary increase, that it's 6 months. Can you please make sure to include this in the offer letter? Once that's included, I'll sign. So just make sure whatever you have is in that offer letter, because then you have a leg to stand on to say, no, you owe me this. If not, it's just a gentleman's agreement, and we know what happens, right? And it may or may not happen, but protect yourself. Okay. So once you guys get to that agreement and you wrap up the negotiation conversation, the response may take a day or a week. Don't be stressed. I've seen it take 2 weeks. Someone may be out here, for example, at the university. We have a whole compensation department that salary negotiation has to go to them. They have to approve it, and then it kind of comes full circle, multiple approvals, and then it comes back. If someone takes a vacation, all bets are off, right? It's going to take a little longer, especially during the holidays. If you do anything from like October to February, just expect that it's going to take longer. Once they respond, ask for some time to consider. If you need it, completely okay to say, hey, can I have a week to follow up with you? This may be something where you're either having multiple offers, or you just want to evaluate it. You want to think about it before you sign on the dotted line. Try to stay away from saying you need to discuss it with your spouse or your partner, parents. You want to appear confident and capable of making your own decision. So take your time considering the offer. Unless you've already gone back and forth, then if you're ready, you can sign. But take your time considering the offer. Remember, this is a place you're hopefully going to be for a while. And by a while, I mean 1 to 5 years. We're not talking, lifetime commitment, although hopefully you are. So if you need to take the time to determine whether this is going to be a good fit for you, compare the offer with your priority list, look at the package as a whole. Maybe the salary is a little lower, but they offered more for relocation or tuition reimbursements. Does the overall offer exceed, meet, or fall short of your expectations? So, start comparing what are the things that are important to you? What are the priorities? I'll take 3 weeks of vacation all day. But if I don't get it and they gave me $5,000 for relocation expenses, great, I'll take that. So what we're going to talk about is the stages of negotiation. You may not do them in order. You may not do them in the exact order. You may not go through all of them. It all depends on you and the company. So all of these are going to vary a little bit. So it's okay if they don't look identical. So we're going to take a closer look at each, thanking them for the offer, learning about the entire package, ask to negotiate, prioritize top wants, and make your case. Consider the offer, discuss the offer, and then accept or decline the offer. So part of negotiation can start immediately. Your first step, I've had way too much coffee today, is to express genuine appreciation and interest in the job. It is not a good tactic to act disinterested. They want to know that you want them to, and you want to treat the details like it's a proposal. And there's a whole difference between like, this is the most amazing company I've ever been at, and I love it, I can't wait to work here, and saying, thank you so much. I'm really excited about the opportunity to join the team. That salary is a great start. So that's an easy way to say thank you. And I want to discuss now, because this is the first phase where you'll get some waiting involved. Waiting is one of the most critical aspects of negotiation. If you say that the salary proposed is a great start and the other party doesn't respond immediately, wait it out. What happens when we ask a question or say something and someone doesn't respond? How's everyone even feeling now with just a couple extra seconds of silence? Like, did everyone start going, wait, did she ask a question? Do I need to type something? Like, we get this kind of like weird, anxious, like, what am I supposed to do? What are next steps? Like, and I've seen students negotiate, and I know that the employer was going to offer higher if the student negotiated, and then the student just is like, oh, well, hey, it's okay. Yeah, the anxiety, we start to get like this verbal, like, just explosion out of the mouth, right? Oh no, it's okay. It's a great start. I'm happy to start at this. Like, we sort of talk ourselves out of it, and the recruiter just is sitting there and hasn't even said anything, right? So we need to be comfortable with the silence, whether that's in interviews or negotiations. So make the proposition, thank you, that salary is a great start. Wait for them to say something. Wait for them to say, what questions do you have about the salary? Hey, what do you want to discuss about the salary? Let them ask the question. Let them make the comment and say, we can go up. But yeah, we need to wait it out. It's so important. Anything that you say, thank you so much, is that salary open for negotiation? We end up talking ourselves to this lower figure when they're willing to go higher. So as you see here, when you hear their offer, also say, not okay. Because then they're gonna be like, well, this person's ready for it. Give yourself some time, and in the silence, the other person is likely to improve in some way. Wait through the awkward pause and let them think. Don't fill up the void. It's okay. Quiet, waiting, it's okay. They'll come back, and then that's where it becomes a discussion, not just you giving a lot of information. We've kind of already talked about this a little bit, but before responding to the number or agreeing to anything, get as much information about the package, company culture, structure, and salary as possible. In other words, delay discussing the salary, start the negotiation, ask questions. So not only pause, but then when they talk, listen to them, ask questions. And the example I told you about, one of the things that we talked about and that he returned with the recruiters and asked questions, he was going to be a floater. And so the question was, is he a floater at 75,000? And once he's in a specific department, will the salary go up? Will he be assigned to a department? And through those conversations and those diagnostic questions, he was able to get the employer and the recruiter to be like, okay, here's what we want to do, and we're going to offer you 90,000. Because you want to know about their needs too. It's not just one way. You want to know about their preferences, their priorities. What are they willing to negotiate? Maybe they'll let something slip a little bit. Professor Lee Thompson at the Kellogg School of Business at Northwestern University says that 93% of all negotiations fail. 93, that's almost all negotiations fail to ask diagnostic questions in circumstances where getting them answered would significantly improve the outcome of negotiations. What are the standard working hours? What is the company's commitment to conference attendance and professional organizations? Can you tell me more about medical, paid time off, and any bonus structures? Having just diagnostic questions is going to help. It makes it a discussion and not just, this is my price and this is it. It's a negotiation with both parties compromising. So I want to talk about some key phrases because I want you guys to be armed. So a key phrase to remember after learning as much as you can and doing research is to keep in mind that recruiters and managers want to keep the offer. They want to complete it. Recruiters, a lot of companies, the Valeros of the world, HEBs, anyone who is in a Fortune level company, they may have 50 students. And especially if you are getting hired in June, like usually June 1 and you're a May grad, they often have like a list. Hey, I need to fill 15 positions. I need to fill 50 positions full-time and internships. They may just be like, if I can give you 2,000, you'll be happy and you sign, great. If I can give you another 5,000 and you'll be happy and you'll sign, great. One less person, and I know I got that locked and loaded, and they're just working through their list. So when you approach that conversation and the negotiation from this perspective, you'll see that you are actually on the same side. Both of you want you to work. So use some of these key phrases. So the only thing preventing me from signing this offer is I was looking at the salary, and I know my peers are getting a higher salary. Remember, recruiters want to complete the offer and start from this angle. So the only thing preventing me from signing this offer is X, Y, and Z. That's a huge area to start with. Also, asking if you can negotiate shows respect and deference. Know that in some state and federal agencies or organizations, you may not be able to negotiate salary, vacation time, or benefits. In some federal agencies, there are very specific details where you can't negotiate. Now, can you negotiate from being like a GS12? There's like different tiers in the GS12 range, and be like a GS12-1 or be a GS12-2, because then you're one step ahead to move up. You might be able to ask that, but most of them won't negotiate. And like I gave you the example, I was a small company, I couldn't negotiate. Nope. This person left, this was their salary when they left, this is what I can offer you, that's it. Startups, smaller companies, independents, and that's where if you can't negotiate, you might be able to ask about salary, vacation time, benefits, and continuing education. They may be able to do that versus a straight salary. So ask some of those things, because you never know. If you are thinking, and they may say, well, we can, what are you thinking? Great, here, then you go back to the phrase, the only thing preventing me from signing this offer is, I'm hoping to get $5,000 more, or I'm hoping to get work from home, right? Is a great piece to negotiate right now, and you get some work-life balance. Well, I know you can't raise the salary, but can I work from home once a week? Okay, that's something we can negotiate in balance. So the next part of this process is for you to be prepared for their response to your questions. So they may say, what are your salary expectations? How much are you currently making? Ooh, these are good questions. And one of the main reasons negotiations don't go as planned is individuals aren't prepared to respond to what the other person said. Just as you prep for an interview, you'll want to prep for your negotiation. We already went over what the beginning of that looks like with your priority list, but this next phase incorporates more than thinking about your prepared points and speeches. It means getting ready for a two-way conversation. Are you prepared if they ask you these questions? So spouse, mirror, friend, family member, just start giving them some of the questions that you might be asked in that negotiation conversation. So if they ask you, well, what are your salary expectations? In this, they want to gauge the very lowest you'd be willing to accept. If you say you're hoping for a certain salary that's at the bottom of the range, they know they won't have to offer you more, even if they were originally planning to. So then offer that one specific number. How much are you currently making? Well, I prefer to not discuss what I'm currently making because this position isn't exactly the same as my current job. I'd like to discuss the responsibilities, and then I'm sure we'll agree on a salary that's appropriate. Or my current employer doesn't allow me to discuss compensation outside of their company. I'd like to respect their privacy. And especially because a lot of you are getting degrees, what I'm currently making isn't based on the degree that I'll get when I start working for you. It makes a huge difference, right? It's kind of like comparing apples to oranges. So be prepared, because they may throw that out and be like, hey, I'm offering you 10,000 more, but your salary should be 30,000 more. So just be prepared for that and have these polite professional responses, because how you respond may influence their responses as well, and their willingness to work with you, right? Unfortunately, we don't have room to negotiate, and we have opportunities for growth and raises. You want to remain both confident and flexible, and that'll go a long way. Remember that you are both wanting the same thing, which is for you to accept the position and to be happy. You also need to remember your value and your worth. You are getting a degree from a top-tier institution, an R1 institution, with one of the best degrees and most in-demand degrees in the field. You are worth negotiating. You are worth even just asking for a few $1,000s more. But what's currently taking place is you need to find that right spot where everyone's happy. So know that you're valuable, know that you are worth just simply asking questions, asking for more money, and getting that. I was talking with a student last year. We were at a conference and we were just having kind of like one of those, hey, let's talk about your future and your career. Give me some information. And we were talking about that. And she goes, I started and applied, and two of us were hired for a position. She was a female and the other individual was a male, both hired for the exact same position, exact same salary, doing the exact same things. Very little difference. They went in, both were offered the same position. She said, great, thank you very much. He said some of these things I'd like to talk about a little more. He ended up with a $15,000 higher salary simply because he asked to negotiate and asked for more. Know your value, your worth, your degrees, your skills, your experience. You're bringing a wealth of information, even if it's not in the exact same field. So make sure that you are prepared and that you just ask. So if the company comes back when you're talking to them and they say, unfortunately, we don't have room to negotiate, you can say, this is a good time to ask about that compensation package, vacation, tuition, stock options, equity, bonuses, all the stuff we've kind of been talking about. There should be able to be some benefits that can provide value. Parking here costs money. Maybe it costs money at your place. Can you provide a parking spot for me? And then if they come back and say, well, we have opportunity for growth and raises. Well, this number is a little lower than I feel comfortable with. So I'd love to discuss my future and performance. No, what are the raises? Will it just be a max 1% raise each year? Or is the max raise 10%? What is the percentage of raise that they're talking about? What are your performance metrics? If I'm able to deliver that in this time frame, would you be open to raising my compensation? If they say yes, make sure you get something that describes this agreement written into your employment contract. Also, feel free to ask people. So I had a friend who was sold this huge world of like not all contract companies and recruiting agencies are bad, but she was told, hey, you're going to be able to make $40,000 or $50,000 more. Yeah, it's easy. It's no problem. Everyone gets it. And then she gets hired and she's like, yeah, they said this, this, and this. And I'm like, really? We've never had that, nor do they have a way to track any of those metrics. So she ended up thinking what she was going to negotiate with a bonus structure and what may have been an ideal bonus structure. But remember, if something seems like super amazing, be like, hey, is there, someone and another employee that I can talk with? You reach out to Ruben, hey, do you have someone at this company that I can talk with and find out a little more information about this pricing structure? Okay, so you've looked over the entire offer and package, you've consulted people. There are people like me and Ruben where if you're like, hey, is this right? Just send us an email. We can be like, yep, this is average for your industry, or yes, this is what that company usually offers. Yes, $40,000 bonus structure based on these things. Yep, you'll get it. They offer this. So you need to evaluate, does it meet your needs? Is it okay to decline as long as you've thought it through? If you're currently working, you can stay in your role whether you continue searching or not. If you're not currently working, trust yourself and keep going. Maybe now you're more comfortable with what you want, your needs, and what you're willing to give up. But if you decline, always do so professionally, always communicate, because the other thing you don't want to happen is to decline something now based on your needs. And then maybe 5 to 10 years later, you circle back around to apply. And they keep a running record of all documentation, everything. If you ghost a company because you're like, I'm not taking that salary, and you ghost them, they're going to have that listed and you're not going to be eligible to return to work there. Or you may have had a bad interaction with the recruiter. Well, guess what? That recruiter's either still there, is the VP of HR, or is now the hiring manager. And you may circle back and see that person. So just make sure that you're always polite and professional, whatever you decide. So if you decline, Google a professional letter. Make sure you're professional in your communication with them. And then the other thing is, or are you going to stay in search? Continue your current position or continue searching. You now know what you're looking for, what you're willing to do, and maybe it's just you needed to practice some of those negotiations. However, what we all want, what the goal is, what Ruben and I love getting emails about is, I've accepted this, here I negotiated, thank you so much for this workshop, here's what ended up happening. Love, love, love getting those, makes me so happy. And the fun part is accepting the offer, celebrating, popping some bubbly after, because you got to celebrate. Communicate how grateful you are for the opportunity, reiterate the terms. Remember, like we said, I can't emphasize enough, that offer letter is life. Once an offer is accepted and a letter is drafted or delivered, it's too late to negotiate terms, including salary. Once you've signed it and sent it, you're locked in. You can ask, but you don't want to be that person on the first day where you're like, hey, I don't like my salary. Can I negotiate for more? Well, you've already said yes to, it's going to stand. So if you verbally communicated or via email, you got to get it in the offer letter. But if you're just going to accept, make sure you're playing professional. Follow up. So once you're kind of maybe negotiating back and forth via email, will this work? I'd like to accept this position at $84,000 and 3 weeks vacation is discussed. I can start on September 17th. Confirm this will all be written in your offer letter. I look forward to seeing this included in my offer letter. So these are the things, always be professional, always be prepared. And sometimes we all make mistakes, or we're like, I accepted too low. I've done that. But then just work your butt off, and at your next performance evaluation, start saving up all your documentation, kind of like we alluded to. It's now more common, but not as common as negotiating a job offer. But if you can show, like, listen, I had 5 stars and I've got all 5s in my review. Here's my 10 customer letters from our top 10 customers who've all said what a wonderful, amazing human I am and how they love working with me. Bring your, almost like defend a dissertation, defend your thesis, defend your presentation, bring that all and have that conversation, use these points. And then there's some other pointers too, in terms of negotiating the salary or a raise or a promotion. So yeah, negotiating a job offer can be scary. It can be overwhelming. It can be done. It just takes looking at it as a conversation. Stay confident, stay prepared, because it's not a battle. Remember that the other side is often expecting a negotiation. Can help kind of calm the nerves a little bit. And then you're prepared. Just know it might not work out, and that's okay. But if you've been professional, if you've been having this dialogue, asking questions, being an active listener, being okay with wait time, you should be okay. So I know that at least one tool from today will come in handy. Use whatever tool you've taken, whatever notes. Hopefully you guys were taking pictures of some of the screens. Use those in your preparation. Use those in practice. Use those as you have them, like as you're emailing back and forth, or open it up as you're having that conversation. And even if you ask, it may not be getting a $40,000 bonus and something like crazy like that, but it may just be the difference in getting the salary offered, maybe $2,000 more, maybe $5,000, but all of that's important. All right, so for the final thing, question and answer, I want to say thank you for letting me share some information with you. There is so much more to this, and I know that there's always questions. So please, if you have questions, put them in the chat. I will answer them to the best of my ability. Maybe Ruben will help me if I get stumped. I hope you guys all learned something and can take away like 1 or 2 pointers and 1 or 2 phrases that you can use. And wait. All right, Q&A. Excellent, thank you, Randy. Bring it on. Or if you maybe have some professional questions in general, you have 2 experts here that can help. So those burning job search questions, we're here for you. Or if there's no questions, it means that I'm perfect and excellent. Okay, what's the distinction between an offer letter and employment contract? They're probably both very similar. And Ruben, if you had any engagement specifically with this, an offer letter is basically, it's usually just like a 1-page document where here's the terms that you agree to, and you sign those. It's basically you saying, this is what I agree to. There's not a huge distinction. Employment contract may also be different because some places may have specific things like NDA, confidentiality, knowledge and research proprietary information. So there may be more things that you're binding to. The offer letter is more just, here's the salary and compensation package that we're agreeing to. And then typically then they move through all of the different stages on the HR level. So typically once you agree with a recruiter, the offer letter is what you get. Once you sign that, it's sealed, it's done. It's saying, I'm accepting the offer, and I'm accepting the terms to the offer. So whether that comes in the form of an offer letter or an employment contract, it ultimately is the same thing. It's ultimately you agreeing to what they're offering, and that's it. There's no more negotiation. This is what they're setting up in their system. So are interactions with startups comparable, or should they be approached much differently? I think all of the same things would be true. You discuss, negotiation, and maybe you choose different phrases like, are you open to negotiation? And they may be like, oh, we've never had anyone ask this. And then you can discuss like, this is where asking those diagnostic questions, especially with a startup, hey, this is what on average students with my degree make in San Antonio. And then this way you can go from there and ask the questions, well, what are you interested in? What can you afford? What are you looking at? And this is where you may negotiate with a startup a bonus or that tiered structure, because they may be waiting and they're like, well, we just bid for this government contract. We're waiting for the government contract to come through. So that may be one of those things where, hey, a government contract usually means mass production. And maybe that's part of your terms. If you help negotiate this contract, or if you're part of this, or if they get this agreement, or maybe even keeping it more vague of any government contract signed will increase my salary by, $20,000. So with startups, it is a little different. And that's more, hey, let's negotiate and see what can you do for me. And that's where they may be more creative than salary, because they may be like, oh, I can't afford this right now, but hey, I can pay for your parking, which if you're working downtown or something, or we can pay for X, Y, and Z. So negotiate, they'd probably be someone who's more flexible with, hey, can I get 3 weeks of vacation instead of 2? Listen, I'll take a week for you to pay me to lay on my beach or to sit at my house. Okay. If responsibilities change, is it recommended to renegotiate, or is it a lock situation, or are responsibilities also emphasized during the negotiation discussion? Okay, Victor, you give me a lot in there. I am going to try to break it down one at a time. And if I miss something, just let me know what I missed. So basically, once you get a job and you've agreed to that, you're agreeing to that job description and that salary. So now if all of a sudden your job changes and they're like, hey, we need you to supervise someone, then I would ask, can we discuss terms? Can we discuss, because usually like if you're supervising someone, that's a lot more responsibility that should come with an increase in salary, because there's training, there's goal management, accountability, all sorts of things. So if your job title changes, if responsibilities change, if they add more, I would then, pursue a conversation and do some of those things. So you revisit it and say, part of my salary was, when we negotiated in the beginning, did not include supervisory. If you're going to include supervisory, I'd like to negotiate, that increase. Always ask. There is nothing wrong with them asking. What happens? They say no, everyone's fine. Nothing happened. Life is good. We continue to move on. That's the worst thing. It's not necessarily locked in, and kind of like, I think Helia was mentioning, you can negotiate a promotion, you can negotiate salaries, or our responsibilities also emphasized during the negotiation discussion. There's all, and the hard part is there's always that line where it's, and other duties as assigned. I think that's other projects, maybe some other areas. So there's some wiggle room if they're just asking you to do some administrative things. But what we're talking about where you want to renegotiate is if they're increasing, like supervisory, or adding something that's not even related, or that's not even mentioned. Like this is a whole other classification and a lot more duties and responsibilities to add. So that's where it's always okay to renegotiate and say, it sounds like we're changing my job description and my responsibilities. This now sounds more like a supervisory title. I'd like to discuss, adjusting my salary to match the duties. Always, again, professional, polite, respectful conversation, right? If you say that, they may come back with yes, no, maybe so, but it's a conversation. Well, we weren't really expecting that. So yeah, just ask, but take the phrases from this workshop and apply those, because some of those phrases are really helpful, and use that wait for them. Awesome. I'm glad I could help you guys. What other questions do you have? We have a few more minutes. So if you have any questions. Ruben gave industry reports. There's also one.
Yeah, that's on the UTSA Career Center website. So they have links to different industry. And again, those may be like off by a year or two, but industry reports on like common entry level salaries for engineering and all the other fields. So take a look at those. Networking is another really good way of knowing, we've emphasized that in a couple of these presentations. So if you know somebody at a certain company, especially keep in contact with like people that are maybe a year or two ahead of you in school, because they'll be the ones kind of getting out there first. I see there's a couple more questions.
Real quick, I dropped CQT in there. That's for the whole UT system. So you can compare by everyone in the UT system in this field, what they're getting. It's a little like of a funky system, because sometimes the degrees aren't like for like from university to university. They may be slightly different, but you can at least compare and go by university or by the whole system and know, hey, in UTSA, most grads with my degree get this. Most grads with a bachelor's or an undergrad degree get this. It's also great. We did this. I had a student in a degree who wanted to negotiate his salary. We looked at this. We looked at a couple other fields on Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and we ended up going, hey, you're already about $5,000 higher than what the average currently is. And so he felt a little bit better and more satisfied in his position, but he still wanted to negotiate because he had some new jobs and different things like that, new skills. Elizabeth, is there a general number of interactions you would recommend before stopping negotiations if salary or compensation can't be agreed on? Ooh, that's a really good question, because that's going to vary person by person. And you can kind of tell based on their response. Recruiters will typically say, this is our final offer. I can't go any higher. Unfortunately, I don't have room for negotiation, or here's the max salary for this position, because there's often caps for each position. So my recommendation would be to kind of feel them out. I wouldn't go back and forth, because you also there's a balance between, I still have to go work there. And you don't want everyone to be like, because that recruiter is probably talking to the hiring manager, you don't want your new supervisor to be like, oh, you are just here for money. You don't want to be here. Like, you don't want that negative first day starting. So I would just kind of start asking and say, here's what I'm expecting. They'll offer you something else. You decide if you can agree on it, or if you say, well, I was really hoping for this. I'm also going to say, like Ruben said, networking is important. Even just talking to, your peers, if you're on an internship, if you have other students, especially if you're in your senior year capstones, or other people in your class who may be currently working. That student was able to negotiate from $75,000 to $90,000. Also, I want you to know he has a master's. It was an MBA, plus he already had 5 or 6 years of experience. So he was able to negotiate from $75,000 to $90,000 because he was talking to the students in the internship, and they were saying, hey, here's what we're making. So he knew that the students that he was on internship with from McCombs were getting $90,000 offers. So those are some of those things where you don't want to be like, well, what are you making? I'm not making that. I didn't get offered that. But you want to do network and talk about, hey, what's the average compensation? What can I look at? What can I expect? And just have some of those casual conversations so that people don't think you're just out for salary. Can the employer still issue the responsibility to you after denying an increase in salary? Guadalupe, I'm going to assume that you're going with I'm already working in that position and they're giving me additional duties and responsibilities. I'm going to say yes, because I think every job description is going to say, and other duties as required, other duties as assigned. And so what they'll do is they'll circle back to that and say, hey, you gave this. Now, are there ways to say things like, well, I really wasn't expecting supervisory experience. I wasn't expecting to manage the budget. We didn't talk about that. There's ways to have those conversations. And those would be things where call me, call Ruben, say, hey, here's what's going on, because that's a specific scenario and there's specific diagnostic questions you'll want to ask the employer. And then sometimes it's also, hey, I've been with this company for 5 years. They keep giving me things. What do I do? This far exceeds, if I was in another company, I know that this other alumni are making X. Or through research, I know they're making X. Or talking with other people internally, but you have to do it on the down low because you don't know who's going to sell you out. But talking to other people and being like, hey, is this normal? Is this something that typically happens? Am I and you may get some more information. But typically the job should be similar to what you signed up for. So if you signed up for entry level data basic, sorry, I'm going back to my wheelhouse with my business students. If you are signed up for something entry level where there's nothing supervisory included, that's worth at least a conversation. Hey, this wasn't something we talked about when I initially got hired. If you like my performance, I would be happy to continue and to add supervising to but I know that that's typically a different salary range. Have that conversation. Sometimes employers just get busy and it happens. I am guilty of it. Someone who can do the job and do it well. So you just keep giving them things. Or sometimes it may be if they're reallocating from someone else who's not doing their job. And I've had to have that conversation with my boss of, hey, this is so-and-so's job. Are you going to pay me their salary to do their job? They're paid a higher salary than me to do this job. And having that conversation, because they may just know you're a go-getter and that you're going to do it. And those UTSA students, they're awesome. So we're going to give them all the job, all the work, because they're going to get it done. And I can rely on them and they're going to get it done. They may not have even thought, it may have just started with small things. And then it's like, yeah, of course you're going to supervise. So they may not even be thinking like, oh yeah, supervising is way out of what this person was initially hired for. And then the other thing I would say is, depending on the size of the company, it may be worth, if they're giving you these, it may be worth applying for an internal promotion. So be looking at the internal job boards of, well, hey, they're giving me this and I'm doing this job. If you're doing it, even if it's not on your job description, put it in your resume and then apply for an internal promotion. I also know it's pretty common. A lot of people will be like, well, I want to see that you can do the job before I give you the job. So there's this whole weird balance and you just have to see what you're comfortable with. And if it's way too much and that, hey, this person with that job makes X, it may be saying, great, are we going to change my job title to, supervisor? So since I'm doing those same duties as the person I currently work with. All right, I don't want to keep you guys any longer. It's 1:02. You're welcome. These are like loaded questions that all vary person to person. I would say use wait time. And then if you have additional questions, seek out someone in your career center or your success center. You can just shoot them an email and say, hey, what do you think about this? And they'll help you negotiate that. And I think Ruben's going to send you a survey. So please let him know, because this is my first time doing it with you guys. So please respond and let him know what you think of it and give your thoughts. All right.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's yours now, Ruben. You have the floor.
Danielle, this was great. Thank you so much. I learned a lot myself, so thanks for covering such an important topic. And thank you so much to our students and guests for being here. This was it. This was the last one. This was and I know quite a few of you were at pretty much all of them. So thanks for attending our workshop series throughout the summer. All of these have been recorded and are going to be available on our YouTube channel. So they'll always be available as a resource that you can seek out. And like Danielle mentioned, I'm also always available as a resource. So if you have like questions or anything I can help with, feel free to reach out. And we will see you in the fall for our Win Wednesday series and all of our other events. So thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your summer and a great rest of your week.
Bye, guys. Thank you.